Good morning, and thank you for joining Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony. I have a wonderful guest today, Kerry Foreman of Get Grounded, and I'm so excited to talk with her. We have a lot of things in common, actually, so can't wait. Kerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Kerry, so you are a mental wellness coach, as well as registered psychotherapist with a master's in clinical mental health counseling.
Yes.
Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about how you got there?
Oh, goodness. I don't know if that'd be a little bit. I actually went back. Well, let's start with I was kind of the go-to growing up. And a lot of therapists have this background. I was the go-to growing up, kind of parentified early in my childhood and helped people through things, right? It just was, it's what I did. It's for good and for bad, right? And went to school for speech communication originally, flunked out of school. Probably should have put that in my biggest failure, but it didn't feel like my biggest failure. So flunked out of school and got back in, and then decided to that I was making enough money that school was not that important to me at the time. So I quit school and moved to Hollywood, which I had mentioned, and to become an actress. That was pretty short-lived because LA just wasn't for me. So came back and got married and had children, 2 children, and decided at age 37, I believe, that I wanted to go back and finish my bachelor's degree, which I did. And when I finished my bachelor's degree, I then decided that I loved school so much that I wanted to finish my master's as well. And so I finished my master's when I was 40. And here I am at 50.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, in the beginning, when I said we have a lot of things in common, I did not go out to Hollywood to become an actress, but I also went to college later in life. I saw that you're 50 this year,
I am.
that is why I'm wearing this little beauty, because I am 50, and this year this is my birthday month, people. So that's
It's a good
wearing
birthday.
the birthday crown. And hearing you talk about, your life in a few sentences, it's interesting because we plan, we come out of school, we come out with what we have from our parents, what we were taught, those generational things that, unbeknownst to even our parents, I think, they put things upon us that we then carry out with us. And so our reactions, our attitudes, our feelings, or, inability to deal with the feelings, those are all very relevant. And I know when I asked you what was your greatest failure and how did you, move on from it, it was that when you were 25, wanting to become an actress, and then dealing with that, processing it as you went through it, it didn't work out, right? So a lot of our listeners are looking for hope. They are looking for ways that they can become more resilient at different stages. We have parents who listen with, younger children as well as adult age children. And a lot of the topics, we arrive back at being able to process those feelings. And so looking back at that experience when you were young, is there anything that you would have done different, and how did you stay resilient through it? Not when you fail and you have to do something else. A lot of times people can easily go, veered in the wrong direction or go off course, So,
Mhm.
how did you stay on track in that experience?
Well, I didn't. I didn't stay on track. I was all over the place at that time. I was 25 years old, and I came back with no car because I had totaled my car out there. So I came back with no car and no job. Um, and before I left, I was a retail manager, had a nice car, was doing decent for myself at 25. So I came back limping large, and limping has never set me back. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but my whole life I've limped off and on. And so I think I just have seen that as a part of my story. It has never scared me into retreating or not trying. It's a part of my journey, the limp is. And so I came back, I got an old job that I used to have. They took me back and worked my way back up to getting a car and a place again. And I have always believed, even as I said, I flunked out of college. I thought, oh, I realized that obviously that was a big failure, and I didn't mention that. At the risk of sounding too positive, I have always believed that whatever the outcome is, it is for me. So even if that is a tough outcome, it's the outcome for me. And so I came back limping. Um, and I just limped until I was walking again. And that's what you do.
So that's really good for people to keep in mind if you go through something and it's not going your way, whether it's day by day or situation by situation. Stay calm in the moment. There's tools that you can learn or adapt or change. I mean, in my life, for example, I went to a baseball game and got hit in the foot with a baseball. And
Mm.
I went for an x-ray. They said, oh, it's not majorly broken, but it might be broken. So I go to the doctor, to the specialist, and through all of that, it was a physical thing, but it set me back. And you said limping, and that's what made me think of this. I was actually limping with the boot and the crutches, and I had never had a break. Um, in my life, I was, not physical or athletic, so I didn't have any experiences like that. And so, in having to take my time and go through it, I had to use those tools to stay calm. I had to still
Mm.
work, I had to take care of the kids, I had to still manage my household. And, you know, if people can be mindful and intentional in their actions, they can stay ahead of the things that might set them back and set them on a path of negativity, right? Like for me, it would have been so easy, you know even when I was younger in school, in high school, I was too afraid to go to college because I had a dysfunctional upbringing, and I didn't have the structure or support to even enroll at that time. And despite the fact that, I was told I could do it through guidance counselors or my friends, I didn't have that. I couldn't do it. So I easily went down that negative path of just immediately jumping from 1 to 100. I can't do it. I'm not doing it. I didn't want to fail, and I let that fear take hold. And
Mm-hmm.
I was able to start working, and I was making enough money to get by, and had an apartment with a friend at first, and then eventually other things happened. But yeah, it's very, very cool that to see that you had a dream, you went for it, you crushed, it didn't work out, and then you, even two things having failed at in such a short amount of time. Now, Kerry, I read that you grew up in a chaotic home. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. My mom comes from a chaotic home, right? She grew up with some of her own trauma. Her mom grew up with some of her own trauma, came from a chaotic home. Thus, I grew up with some trauma and came from a chaotic home. I think that it's hard to talk about the home that you came from without feeling like you're shading the people you love in some way or another. And I talk about the way I grew up with a lot of curiosity and compassion for my parents because again, my mom came from trauma and dysfunction and generational trauma as well. And so she didn't really know what she didn't know. What she did know was and I think almost every parent I know and have worked with wants the absolute best for their children. They want different than what they had. What they don't realize is we can't just create that out of thin air. Like we have to have coping tools and we have to have understanding for ourselves and acceptance for ourselves in order to create something different for our children. And so, what I grew up in was a home with emotionally immature parents with really good intentions. They did not have the emotional maturity to meet me where I was. And I think that they did when I was young, right? Because it's not easy when our children are young, but the thing that is easier when our children are young is that they don't talk back as much. They don't have their own opinions. They don't they don't resist, they don't press in specific ways that might trigger us as much as when they become preteens and teenagers. I have always been very headstrong. I've always had an inner voice that could kind of gauge the environment, knew when things were off and would voice it. Had to be really fun for my parents, but I would voice what I thought they were doing wrong um, and ask for them to speak to me differently and things like that. And they just didn't have the tools to do that. And a lot of infighting in the home between my mom and dad. We had not much money, and so finances were always a point of contention, and not a lot of no awareness around our own emotions. So when one of my parents would feel a lot of emotion, whether it be anger or sadness or fear, it would flood them. And they didn't have the coping skills or the tools to deal with that. So it got taken out on us.
Mm. Wow, wow. So that's, that's so interesting because a bit of it might be the generation, and
Hmm.
um, there everything happened so fast, from like the 50s to the 60s, 70s, 80s. Like it's so amazing like how how everything happened. Now, in let me reflect a little bit on my upbringing. My parents were divorced when I was 5, and my mother went on welfare, so we didn't have money. My mother was um, she got involved with another man and had a baby, so I had a half sister, but the man didn't want to marry her, and so my mom then also was mentally ill. So you know in my life, I look back and I see that she was always there for me. But in her mind, she was doing the best that she could. But again,
Hmm.
also not aware of the impacts it had on me. And,
Hmm.
worrying about my mom's feelings, I became codependent and, you know, a, ca- what's the word? There's like when you're too much of a caregiver, it's,
Like a
but,
people
but
pleaser?
yeah, people pleaser. And, I try to look for my own um, acceptance of others by taking care of them, even if they don't want it. So, you know,
Mm.
but,
Yeah.
but, but again, yeah, but it's true that, when we come out of our upbringing, there's so many things that seem okay, or the kids will get used to it. The parents fight, just go in your room, kids. Well, we're in the room, we're hearing the fighting, we're getting anxious, we're upset, we're worrying. We carry that through our childhood and through our life. When I was in 8th grade, a guidance counselor brought me a little placard, and it said, "Worry is the advance price you pay for troubles that may never come."
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that again: worry is the advance price you pay for troubles that may never come. When I saw that, it was like the first time I heard any kind of positivity or emotional support, or a tool that I could use. Imagine, I'm in 8th grade, right? That's like late in life. And that's why I think in today's world, we're so fortunate that we can put this message out there to parents to encourage their
Yeah.
kids, give them time and understanding, and be open and talk about the emotions and the feelings. And there's so many aspects of this, right? There's the
Yeah.
whole men don't feel their feelings, or uh, people together in relationships interact differently depending on what relationships they have, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
the whole idea about dealing with stress and coming through life in such a way that you can give back, it's I think this is a message, and I've said it before on my show, that parents, please be mindful of this, to listen to your kids, to help understand patterns that you yourself have grown up with, to be able to address it.
Mhm.
That thing I said about caring and doing too much, I realized the other day, despite the fact that I'm a life coach, I was a career coach for many years, behavioral assistant helping youths. I put out a book called Emotional Strength Explained, helping others to have a place to focus and go through their path and determine what they need. Despite everything, all my education and tools, I think I still need to explore. I think it's a journey. So Carrie, you have many tools available to others. I saw online you have Get Grounded, um, where you focus on mindfulness and ability to change our brains, and you're passionate about understanding the patterns that people grew up with, and we can change our thinking to change our life. I love that.
Mm.
Tell our listeners about that.
Yeah. So Get Grounded is my Facebook page, and I started it in 2015, um, but didn't really know what I was starting, to be honest with you. It kind of blew up, but I was just really vulnerable and authentic on there in talking about, look, even as a therapist, I'm healing. I'm not healed. Life coaches, therapists, I think people expect that we aren't still dealing with some of our own issues. And the reality is, I don't know a therapist or a life coach that isn't. And so I started talking really openly about that, about how I got here, how I kind of stumbled here, right? And some of the inner voices that I dealt with and what those were created from. I call them parts of me now, because when I call them inner voices, people start to go, wait a minute, what's going on? What's going on in there? But we all can explain ourselves in parts, right? A part of me wants to go, a part of me doesn't want to go. And so when I started to hear those parts of me a little bit clearer and pay attention to them and take good care of them, I felt strong enough to start writing. And writing is my passion. I love writing. And so I just started writing openly on Facebook about the journey that I was on. And at the time, the biggest piece of that journey was mindfulness. It is now, I call it like one of the main bricks in my foundation, because any of the work that I do with clients, we start with mindfulness, which is, the formal form of mindfulness is meditation. The informal form of mindfulness is curiosity and compassion and awareness. because what it did for me, and what it does for my clients is allows us to have curiosity and compassion for ourselves, which then in turn gives us the ability to have curiosity and compassion for the people that we love, for the people that we run into at the grocery store, for everyone. And it raises our awareness of our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own needs, and the behaviors that come from those. And that is so important in being able to lead through self with a capital S. If I want to lead through my best and highest self, it's important that I understand all the parts of me that would prefer to lead that day. It's important that I understand, okay, I'm telling myself some stories this morning, and here's what those stories sound like, and here's how I can poke some holes in those stories. And that's what I want to offer, and that's what I do offer my clients. It's what I offer on Get Grounded. Really, a lot of free content on my Facebook page, and on my website, to where because I could just talk about this stuff all day, and so I do in my writing. And I've had many people say, I feel kind of like sometimes I feel like this shouldn't be free. I feel like you need to write a book, and I'm finishing my book proposal this week. So, um, finally, but that's another one of those outcomes that I felt like, you know what, if that's for me, then it will come for me. And I kept getting more and more signs that, okay, this is an outcome that is for me. And I didn't want to just write a book to write a book. I want to write something that teaches, and I want to write something that other people aren't talking as openly about. And I want to write something that helps us to understand, okay, all this shit happened to me, right? And now here I am holding it. What do I do with it? Especially as a parent. Of course, it's extremely relevant, not as a parent as well, but especially a lot of my clients and readers are parents. So how do I get from there to here? Because we talk a lot about what you should be doing with your children, but we don't talk a lot about how I can get from here's how I was treated, here's how my emotions were received, here's how my needs were either ignored or not ignored, and here's what that looks like today, what came from how I was raised, and here's what I had to do to be able to be in my best and highest self as a parent. Because I think that we get something lost in translation from, oh my gosh, here's everything that happened to me growing up. Here's what I want for my children, but how do I get from here to there? So just really try. That's what I do in my work, but it all starts with mindfulness.
Yeah, and when you're talking, I'm thinking about my own experience and other youth I've dealt with and other dynamics of households, because again, it's not the typical mother, father, children. Oftentimes, there's many different varieties of that. And so when you have caregivers, and you have the kids who have either had their own trauma experiences, and again, trauma doesn't have to be a car accident or losing a parent.
Nope,
Trauma
it's
can be
perception.
something that a person feels as traumatic, such as my daughter, who was locked in a bathroom for 5 minutes at the baseball field, and she turned the light off and she was
Traumatic.
3. And then it was traumatic for
Yes.
me. I'm outside the door trying to talk to her, keep her calm. I talked about this on another show, but it seems to keep coming up as a good example of
Yeah.
what trauma can be. Um, but yeah, so again, when you involve all of that, as well as the personality and how the child is wired, everything you learn may not be enough. So it's so good to have, like, I'm so excited to hear about your book coming out. I can't wait to hear more about that. Just to recap for the listeners, at this point, Kerry is sharing a lot of good detail here for us all to learn from. And she wants to make sure that people are acceptance of themselves, know that there's tools out there, Try to take time to recognize parts of yourself to feel stronger so that you can lead with your best self. And that starts with mindfulness. Have curiosity and compassion for yourself. This will raise awareness within yourself, and you'll be able to be compassionate for others, of their feelings, thoughts, and even your own behaviors, and then your needs. Like, this is like such a huge gift. I feel it's like, when you have a birthday, because I love, it's my birthday month, I'll say it again. No, when you have a birthday, for example, or Christmas, or any holiday, right, you want to have a gift. It's like the anticipation of that, and you plan, maybe you're going to buy something for someone else, maybe you want to get them just the perfect thing. And I think if we all took time to be honest and open with ourselves, to understand what we can do different, that's so huge. And I've always been a big proponent of that, of believing and having hope that you can change and come out of it, based on what I went through. It's such an amazing thing when you see the difference. I think you had shared a post, and it's something along the lines of, um, you've changed, and that's such a good thing. It's when someone
Mm.
recognizes that you're different, or you're more positive, or you're reacting better to things like that. That's so amazing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it has historically, you've changed, has historically been used as a way to yank people back, right? We're going to yank you back to who you were because who you've
Mhm.
become is no longer working for me, or who you've become is not the role that I want you in. So you've changed works really well on people who are codependent, or it works really well on those of us who are raised to put other people's needs before our own. But if you take it as a compliment, right? Because we're supposed to change. We are supposed to organically become different versions of ourselves, and sometimes not organically. I work hard for the different versions of myself. So you've changed. Hell yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, right, right. And when you started saying that, I something came to mind. When my mom was homeless at a point, and she was coming to the house, and she was asking for things. And at that point in my life, I had a 3-year-old son, and I decided that I wasn't going to give her that same caring, because it was not going to help her. And so she said, you've changed. You're not as nice to me, or I don't know who you are. You're not the same daughter that I had. And, yeah, that's that guilt. That's that guilt trip that would normally have brought me back in. Oh, mom, I'm sorry. Come here. Let me help. And when I went through that, I said to her, I said, no, this is called tough love. When you're ready to come and take a shower in my house because you smell, you then we'll talk, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately
Boundaries.
it didn't. Yes, it didn't happen. That's a whole nother. I have my memoir, but it's not completed yet. So when it gets there, I'm going to put that story out, because it's wonderful. Just to, anyway,
That's
toot my
awesome.
own horn.
Yeah. No,
Well,
please do. It's not easy to write a
you're
book.
yeah, yeah. Well, this book was quite easy. This Emotional Strength Explained. It's a self-help workbook, so it's not a book of reading and digesting and then coming to your own conclusions or taking those steps. It's a quick and easy book. You may want to check it out just as a example. Or I've had people even tell me it helps to where they don't need as much counseling, or it helps with the counseling to get to the issues faster. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is Emotional Strength Explained, a new way of responding to emotional life, a workbook. And there's prompts in here every day, and you go in and you read, and you write things down, you explore your feelings. It talks about acceptance, and your looks at criticism and judgment. It helps you to redefine health, and then you go through a process where you decide to accept it, not make any excuses anymore. And it really helps you to find solutions, and it's generic. It can be for someone who's just starting out, but it's one of the tools that kind of helps you have a place to focus and figure out that next step. um,
It sounds
Speaking of,
amazing.
yeah, thank you, thank you. I released it in December of this past year, and ever since then, things have been exploding. Like such as this radio show. I've be having a behavioral assistant position to help youth, and um, doing some speaking. I'm going to be featured in a magazine. Like things are just opening up. It's so
That's
wonderful
so
to be able
great.
to get the messages out, of help and healing. You were talking about the you've changed, and I know that I sent you a couple questions, and one of the things that you responded with was, I asked you, can you describe a difficult team situation you have been in, and how did you react to it? And you mentioned about one where you were in graduate school at 838, and your whole cohort was full of non-traditional students. One student was a 50 something fundamentalist white man. We will call him Bob. And a question that came to you guys as budding counselors: what is a population you cannot work with?
Mhm.
Um, and I would love to hear you talk about this because it's such a relevant topic today, in our world, where a lot of people are, able to be themselves, and as you did as a child, speak up for what you believed, what you thought was right, and yeah, I just want to touch on this topic a little bit.
Yeah. So I have, as I said before, I have always been very headstrong, passionate about my beliefs and not forcing them on anybody else. And what I've come to realize is as I've gotten older and more issues have been brought into my awareness, there are certain beliefs that I hold about human beings that I guess I could be guilty of trying to force on to other people. And one of them is equality. Um, and this particular cohort member, his answer to the question of what is a population that as a therapist you think that you could not work with, his answer, and we were all sitting there, right? And I'm in my head thinking, gosh, I can't come up with one. And I could looked around at my other classmates and they're all struggling. And he had no problem and stood up and said the LGBTQ community. He didn't word it that way, but that's what he was referring to. And I was pissed. I was immediately there was no curiosity, there was no compassion coming from me. I immediately felt like, how can you be going into an area of expertise to help people, to help all people, and say that there's this group of people that you're not willing to help? That did not register for me. I couldn't understand that, and I had no problem challenging him on that. Um, Certainly known for my big mouth throughout my whole life. It's gotten me into trouble and it's solved a lot of problems for me. So good and bad. But the teacher encouraged us to have a really good, fruitful conversation from that. And it was a great practice for me because I grew up, debating. It was in my family, a lot of arguing, right? But sometimes it was called debate. And I became really good at debating. My major was speech communication in college, and so I fancied myself good at it. And the reality is, if you're debating, you're not really listening to understand, right? And so it moved me into a position of listening to understand, because what it came down to was his fundamentalist belief system would be harmful to somebody in the LGBTQ community.
Mhm.
That's really what it came down to. And that professor was trying to get us to be aware of where we would do more harm than good. To me, him even holding that opinion rubbed me the wrong way. Number one, if I'm being honest. Number two, um, saying I would not see this population just felt so discriminatory that it made me feel angry. And the more I moved from debating and shooting him and telling him, what's right and what's wrong and how he needs to be in this position, um, the more I moved away from that, I was able to move into curiosity, compassion, and realize it really is our responsibility as therapists to be able to say, I think I would do more harm in this area than I would good. And he knew that about himself, and he was absolutely correct. He would have done more harm.
Yeah, right. And as far as the LGBTQ community has come, and I know there's even bigger and more changes coming down the pike. So, the thing that I've heard some others say is that they're not going to change everybody. They're not going to change. So having that knowledge, you know, and you've said it too, knowledge is power, right? So you can acknowledge where you can be trusted. You can acknowledge where you can't, and that's something that, when I was younger, um, my stepfather, he didn't like biracial couples. He didn't know why, but he spoke to us and he said, "Look, your mother doesn't have a problem with it, and I just don't like it." And he had grown up in the South and he had seen where um, women were abused, even his own mother. So that came from his experiences. Um, and he was of a nationality and my mother was a different nationality, and I would always speak up as a kid and I would try and say, well, look, it's no different than you being Polish and my mother being Irish. That's different. How come that's okay, and you know so again, we had our debates and different things about topics like this, but that was interesting because you know, learning that came from his upbringing, then I knew that he wouldn't be someone to trust with something like that, and
Mm,
that's very important. People today, if they're going through, different journeys, trying to figure out who they are, that's very good. That's great because it's important for them to know that, they have to know who they can trust and who they can't. So,
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
that's that's a good lesson, I think.
yeah.
Carrie, some of the things that you offer, you have a couple of things that you offer. You have a podcast I saw,
It is on
called
pause
Ground.
right now, though, but I do. Yes, Grounded House.
Okay, Grounded House. And again, I always try and highlight resources, right, that listeners can use to go back to if they like something here on the show. They can go back and check out the guests and the tools and services that they have. Um, what about Grounded Parent and Grounded Teen?
Hmm. Yeah, those are two of my favorite groups. So I think my best resources that I'm offering right now online are Grounded Teen, Grounded Parent, and a program that I do called Journey to Self. And Grounded Teen is up, they're all at this point pre recorded, self paced. So you can purchase them on my website and you get the live groups, but they are pre recorded, and skill sheets that come with that to kind of walk you through each week's recording. And Grounded Teen is a group of teens where we learn mindfulness together, emotional awareness, emotional availability, how to take care of ourselves, and how to recognize what emotion is coming up in us, recognize the thoughts that go with that, be aware of the urge for the behavior that would come from that, and learn some coping tools and some skills around how to best take care of ourselves in that. Grounded Parent is same format, but it is a group of parents, and we are learning how to be a mindful parent. So, how to pay attention to what is happening in us before we try and handle what's happening in our children. And Journey to Self is my newest group, and I love this group. It is same format again. It's self-paced, pre-recorded live groups with skill sheets and guided meditations that come with that. Journey to Self is about recognizing all the different parts of us that lead during the day or that come up and express a need, how to take good care of all the parts of us, and how to create more self energy so that we can be our best self.
Wonderful. I have some
And
people I need to refer to you at the moment from hearing this. The teens, our teenagers that are teenagers now have just gone through COVID. They've had a separation. Many parents have said to me, the kids don't know how to interact. They don't, like even a
mm,
simple thing of making a phone call instead of sending a text and waiting for a response. It's like not common. So,
yeah,
so that sounds like a wonderful tool. Grounded teen, um, awareness for the urge for behaviors. That sounds very relevant and useful.
yeah.
My 9-year-old can use that. Let me tell you. Do you think it
Oh, I
would
also
be
have Grounded Tween. I forgot. I do have Grounded Tween as well. Yeah.
wonderful? Okay,
And the Grounded
grounded.
Tween group is same skills but on a younger level. We make a meditation bottle in our group, so they can learn kind of how to be still, how to notice. So um, that is a really great group, and I can't believe I didn't mention that. But yeah, Grounded Tween's another great one. And I have to mention that part of the reason that I started doing this specific kind of work with parenting and self work and teens and tweens, I was a school counselor for 5 years before I went into private practice, and I often it would come back. I would have kids coming in and I would be trying to help them, equip them with tools, and I would be sending them back to the same environment.
Mhm.
And that's what the issue became. And I started realizing I need to be working with the parents. And so I don't solely work with parents. I work with all types of people, but the majority of my work is I have a side group called Grounded Girls that I've worked taught them mindfulness since they were 9 years old, and they're 16 now. Same group of girls, and so I do have pockets where I work with teens and tweens specifically, but so much
Mm.
of my work is with the parents and the interaction between, because of how we started this chat is, you know, my mom came from generational trauma, and she really wanted better for us. She had no idea how to do it. She had no idea how to help herself and fill her own needs so that she could do and be all that she wanted to be for us. And so I really feel like it's just so empowering to those of us who come from dysfunction, and that is the majority of us. It's so empowering for us to be able to see that, oh, this is possible. I don't have to be in reaction all the time. I can choose response, and that response can come from a full cup that I filled myself and from knowing and understanding myself on a deeper level and caring about myself, having self compassion.
Yeah, that's so true. I recently became certified in something called ARC Grow, and it is for parents and caregivers, and it teaches that exact thing. It's somewhat new, and now it's coming through, I guess, state by state. Um, but it's something you might want to look into as an ad hoc to what you do. But
Mm-hmm.
it is that it's being able to be mindful, have tools and techniques to stay calm in the moment and all throughout, like taking care of yourself and recognizing different patterns and different reactions you have. So in certain families, the child is having a behavioral issue. And, as you say, the environment at home plays a part. And so if every time the kid does the thing that they do, which is a reaction to a need not being met, the parents or caregivers have their reactions. And the father might be yelling, the mother might be, trying to calm everything down, but really just causing more anxiety by redirecting. And then it just fizzles and dissolves, and the child is left with just one example. But there are many ways that they can course correct while taking care of themselves. One man had said, "Oh, well, I don't do anything when it happens, when the kids are acting up. I don't do anything." But then after he had homework and he came back and he said, I I play Sudoku, I watch funny videos on YouTube. And he didn't even realize that those are in the moment tools that he uses when he gets stressed out.
Mhm.
It calms him down, refocuses himself, and then he comes back and then he can talk to the child about what he had done without exploding in anger. And,
Yeah.
these are some of the examples that, that it teaches, like each person to identify the things that they do and then the reactions that they see in their family member, so it even helps independently, interrelationship as well.
Yeah. And I think the
So yeah.
big the golden nugget to pull from that is when we recognize how we react or what we're doing to negatively contribute to the situation, not shaming ourselves, loving ourselves through it, understanding that there is a part of me that's trying to protect me from something here, or it's trying to fill a need in some way, and so I can take care of that part of me, and then I don't have to be so big. I don't have to have such a big reaction to whatever's happening inside my child.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, oftentimes if we feel shame or there's shame associated with getting help, that's another thing where someone thinks immediately, oh, if I get therapy or if I get new tools or techniques, it's something that I feel bad because I'm not good enough or I'm not. But the truth is that we're all suffering the human condition, right? We're No one of us is perfect. And if you need to get some tools or tips, it doesn't mean that you are, lacking. It's just that you weren't taught. And that's something
Yeah.
that's hard, especially for a lot of people,
Yeah.
to accept. Um, One of the things, Carrie, that you mentioned, is that you were born. All right, so if you don't mind, I'll read from this
Go right ahead.
question response. Um, I did find myself in a small downtown office with my dog by my side, helping woman after woman find themselves. It came to me in visual images and a feeling inside my body. When I am helping and finding hope with someone, I am in self. That is what I was born to do in whatever form that takes. That is so beautiful. Then you
Thank you.
go on to say, growing up, I did not have a woman mentor that reached down to pull me up, so I became her. That's so inspiring. That's so amazing too. So thank you for putting yourself out there to help others. Um, so, as a grown woman, I have had plenty of strong women stand beside me and reach out their hand to pull me close. Amazing women who saw my light and sparked it higher, never asking me to shrink or minimize my message or light. Often, dreams don't have bold lines around them or flashing lights that tell you the path or the title you're working toward. We have to be able to see it in our minds, feel it in our bodies in the way joy does. And it looks like peace and satisfaction. When I read that, that's what I realized is different for a lot of people. Um, when I recently have spoken to my husband about being mindful, because I realized he, and we were best friends, and then we got married, and we, got our house, then we had our kids, and it was really a true love story. But now fast forward years later, when it's a little more difficult to manage things because we're overworked, we're overtired, overstressed, and and I have a blog that I resurfaced. So the two recent blogs that I have written about is rewiring your brain, and so that's why this subject is so relevant, right? That's one
Yeah.
of the topics that you also promote. But the other one is about happiness, and I just have a few pointers on happiness and what it is and how to become happier. Um, the feeling of peace and satisfaction, I mean, that's not always something that people see that as a luxury. That's what you get when you go on vacation once a year, or that's
Mm.
what the weekend is for. um, what is it like when people drive for that in their daily life?
When they, what is it like when people drive for peace and satisfaction in their daily life?
When they strive for it, when they have that as a goal, like you work with
Yeah.
people, and or you yourself, you've had examples maybe where people were bogged down by the negativity, or they didn't have the tools to get to where they wanted, right? Which is that peace and satisfaction, or happiness as people call it. So um do you have any tips to offer our listeners about how they might do that, get to that peace and satisfaction on a daily basis, or
Yeah.
um, you know, to motivate them? That's what I want to do, because I found people, they want to change, but they don't take the steps, and I really feel like people can make these changes, whether you small nuggets of happiness, as I've read in your material online. How can they do that? What can they expect?
Yeah. I think that we have elevated happiness to a level that maybe it doesn't deserve. Happiness is fleeting and it comes and goes throughout our lives. It's a state of being that we can be in until we're not in. And so often we are grasping to the outcome of feeling happy. So that's why we head down during the work week and yay, it's Friday. So now I can be happy. So we're grasping to what happy looks like. We're grasping to what happy feels like. And we've really applied all these things to the word happy that I'm not sure it actually has earned, but we continue to try and grasp to the outcome of happy. And so part of what I teach my clients is we're going to do this. So we're just going to let go and take our hands off of the grasping part of our lives, because the more we grasp to an outcome, the outcome has to be this. I have to feel happy all of the time. I have to feel happy most of the time. I have to go on 2 vacations a year. My house has to look this way, whatever it is. We start grasping so tightly to it that you can no longer catch the happy, right?
Mm.
And so when we stop grasping and we become a little more still and introspective, and we go inward instead of outward so often, because again, this happiness that so many people are grasping to is an outward definition of what happy is. And everybody's happy is different. Mine, I don't even know that I would call mine happy anymore. I don't use that word very often because I feel joy often, right? I feel peace most often, peace and joy and satisfaction with what I have and not constantly needing more. Those equal what I think people are trying to describe as happy. So I think one of the big tools that I use for that is acceptance versus aversion. So accepting things as they are instead of wishing them different. And we spend so much of our lives wishing things different. Even even when we've been shooting for a goal and then we get it, well, it'd be better if this happened, right? It'd be better if I had also gotten this house, or it'd be better if I was still married to this person, or it would be better if my kids were still at home when I reached this goal. There's always a but, or a, yeah, and if it would have been this way, I think I would have enjoyed it more. So just noticing in each moment, am I in acceptance of what is right now, or am I wishing it different? And the more often that you are wishing that moment different, the longer that chase for happy will be.
Mm.
And so moving from aversion into acceptance is a huge piece of that peace and satisfaction, and not grasping to specific outcomes. And that just comes from noticing, okay, is there an outcome that I'm attached to right now? Is there an outcome that I am grasping to right now? And if there is, what steps can I take to move out of the grasping part? Which doesn't mean that you stop working for what you want. It doesn't mean that you're not, shooting for goals, or showing up to work. I think that people get caught up in, well, that's a slippery slope. If you're not grasping to an outcome, it's a slippery slope. You might become so lazy that you stop working for anything. It just, in my experience, it doesn't work that way. It
Mm.
it works in that we become more joyful, more peaceful, more satisfied with what is.
That's so relevant and so true. It's such a huge nugget of helpfulness. I just can't even tell you.
Yay. Good.
I as you were talking and you were saying that instead of striving to be happy, you feel more joy and peace and more satisfied. Um, and you notice it in the moment, you're more intentional. Notice if you're grasping toward an outcome, and then see what kind of acceptance you can have. You know, 50 is a milestone, and I'm sorry to keep bringing this up. It's where I am
Oh,
right now.
listen, I love 50.
Fabulous in 50. That's what I'm going with.
That's right.
But but the in getting here, I started out the beginning of the year thinking, okay, it's a milestone. I want to acknowledge it, and I want to do something bigger than I would normally do, which is like a trip to the beach here with the family every summer. We do that as a tradition. Um, and each time I considered something like Italy or the south of France, I I came to the conclusion that no, it's not the right time, whether the COVID or the money or the, just coordinating logistics. And then I said, well, but wait, I'm worth it. And I was, really looking at it as though it was a make or break my acknowledging this milestone. And I would stuff it down and say, okay, I'm going to think about that later. And then I would put it off. And I realized I do that in other things too. If I have, you know, I want my children's behavior to change, for example, I will focus on telling them, this is what you should do. This is what you do as a child. You be a good, you think about others and you listen to your parents, you obey, you're obedient. This is what you're supposed to do. You have two things. You be a good student and a good child to your parent. That's all you got to do. Two things. But it's not always that simple. And so when I realized in my 50 milestone that I could accept, like, because what's the goal? The goal is to enjoy life. It's about the experience with my husband or my kids. And I want the kids with me. So, you know what? Our beach trip is going to be my celebration. And I've accepted it and I'm okay with it. I mean, it took like 4 months to come to
Mm.
that, but it was a
Hmm.
different way in thinking, because before I would have just charged it and I would have gone and done it, like,
Yeah.
so that's, and that's a fun example. That's like a fun example. But even with even with the kids or the job, and if we're hard on ourselves, that we aren't working hard enough or aren't putting enough time in, or we're thinking negatively and we're putting too much time in because you don't get credit from your boss or whatever it is. If you step back and look at it from a more intentional, mindful place with joy as the outcome instead of happiness, then that really, it changes I really love that. I like that. I do.
Good. Yeah, I love that you like it. I created something, and I give this to each of my clients as homework, to come up with a joy list of things that bring you joy, that you feel joy when you're doing them. And they should be things as small as watching birds in your backyard, petting your dog. I mean, all the things in your life that bring you joy, and you put them on a list, and that list is ever evolving. And um, we do more of it, because then you're in this life instead of wishing for Italy.
Right, right. And I bought a book recently, and it was that during COVID, a man started a joy list.
Hmm,
He wrote down all the things that brought him joy, and the next thing you know, he had this book, and I just thought it was so unique and it was
good for him.
inspirational. I gave it to my daughter, I think. But yeah, it's a wonderful tool that anyone can do. Um, and I think too, if we are more mindful in our days and our presence and seeing what we have, I think it really does add value. It does help us to be emotionally stronger and more present, right, for others. And so,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
it, you know, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I want to be careful to not put too much weight on joy also, because I invite all emotions in. Each one is just as important as the next. Anger is just as important as joy. For anybody who hasn't seen the movie Inside Out, and I am not an animation fan, but Inside Out is so good in how it explains, we can't have joy without sadness. And that is in my morning meditation, any self inquiries I do, any time that I pause and pay attention. I'm not shooting for joy. I'm paying attention to who's here, and whoever is here gets my curiosity and compassion and love and understanding. And the more that I give that curiosity, compassion, love, and understanding to anger, and the more that I give curiosity, compassion, love, and understanding to sadness and grief, the more joy feels comfortable to visit more often. Because if I push anger and grief, the negative emotions that most humans don't want to feel, if I push those out, it, it it seems I'm always striving for joy. But if I pay attention to those and take really good care of them and love them exactly the same as I would as if it were joy entering the room, then they all kind of play together. And I'm not grasping to the outcome of joy. So it's not slipping through my fingers so much. I'm just here with whatever is here, and what is what I'm feeling.
So that's, yeah, if you feel all your feelings, then the negative feelings won't be so big because you're
Hmm.
handling them with curiosity, compassion, and understanding.
Yeah.
And in when we have our different guests on, there's a recurring theme, which is failure. We have anger, and then all of the negative ways that people handle those things, or they avoid them by not handling them. So listeners, Kerry Foreman, mental wellness coach. Carrie, how can people find you? How can they find you? You have online.
I do. So I'm on Facebook. It's Get Grounded. Actually, it's Get Grounded with Kerry Foreman on Facebook. just a little W/Kerry Foreman. And I am on Instagram under Get Grounded. I'm also on TikTok under Get Grounded, but I have to admit, I'm not as active on TikTok. Well, I'm active in watching all these amazing creative human beings on there, but I'm not as active in putting out my own content on TikTok. And then kerryforeman.com, and it's Kerry, F as in Frank, ORE, M as in Mary, AN as in Nancy.com. And that has all my contact information on it as well. You can email me at groundedminds@gmail.com if you have any questions.
Wonderful. So Kerry has shared so many things today. Just to recap again, you know, choose to respond instead of react. Recognize what you're going through without shame. She also mentions that happiness is typically a state or a feeling based on outward definition, and people grasp to what happy feels like. But she encourages you to let go and don't grasp to that outward outcome. Um, Take introspective and go inward. You can strive to feel joy and peace, and satisfaction. Notice each moment, and if you're grasping toward an outcome. Um, Carrie also suggests a joy list. Create a joy list to become more joyful, but don't focus on uh, joy or happiness. Instead, feel all your feelings so that the negative ones are not so big, by handling them with curiosity, compassion, and understanding. Kerry is available at Get Grounded on Facebook, Instagram, and kerryforeman.com is her website. Kerry will help you move into self, and once you are in the self, it is something that will be hard to stop. So, I know, Kerry, there was a question that I asked about small wins. Um, do you have any small win that might create a sense of purpose and create an energy that will have an upward spiral? Um,
I can't
and I
remember what
know
I said. I feel like I had a good one.
it. Well, you had mentioned in your response, that you haven't been a person that always had motivation spilling out of your
Ah,
veins. That you used to wait for motivation, and you couldn't understand when it didn't come for you.
hmm
But that was before you understood trauma and how our bodies respond to it. And so then you mentioned about understanding survival strategies that were formed as children. You were able to then move on, understanding all of yourself and accepting yourself. And when you didn't have the motivation, you found discipline. And discipline is the path to motivation.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably, I'm glad that I asked because I would not have remembered that, even though it's exactly what it took me this morning, headed to the gym. Um, I have not always been someone with consistent motivation. I get big jolts of motivation and creativity, and if I could get everything done in those big highs, right, then that would be great. But unfortunately, you need consistency. And what was happening was that when motivation didn't come for me, then I would start feeling shame and guilt and wondering why, right? That I can't stay motivated. And what I found through 10 years of working with clients really is that most of us who come from different kinds of trauma find it very, very difficult to stay consistently motivated. I think most humans do in general. Um, and discipline is something I kind of worked against my whole life. Even I love Diet Coke. And to the point where if I give myself too strict of rules around Diet Coke, then I'm going to have one every day. you can forget it. If I tell myself I can only have, that I can't have any, I'll be having one a day. Thank you very much. If I just have consistent discipline in that, you know what, I don't have Diet Coke 5 days a week, but I sure do 2 days a week. It opens it up for me and it allows me to be um, more consistently, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Grounded.
Grounded. Look at there, see? More consistently grounded in what I want for myself. And so for me, I know there's an eighth of a second before my brain starts talking me into, you really want that Diet Coke. I know it's a Tuesday, but you really want that Diet Coke. Or it's a Monday and I am tired and I just started my hormones and I really don't want to go to the gym this morning. If I wait for that, you can bet I'm not going. I'm not going to the gym. If I just move forward in a disciplined fashion, put my shoes on, I noticed the thought, but I'm going to let it go, come back around to putting my shoes on, putting on my clothes, get in the car. I'm not thinking, I'm not creating stories of why I shouldn't go or don't need to go or any of that. I'm just moving forward. For me, that kind of discipline helps set me up for wins on a consistent basis. And I'm no longer waiting for motivation because the more disciplined I am, I feel the motivation more often.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And on the topic of the wins, it used to be that we understood self-care as having that piece of chocolate or that Diet Coke or being easy on
Mm,
yourself because you deserve to relax or rest. When, today it's a little bit different. It's defined, as self-care is going to that gym and making yourself go, or not eating that or drinking that thing, or not
yeah.
having the alcohol or whatever it is that you do. And and that's a hard thing, right? Because when I was growing up, my in my family or whatever, the grandmother would push all the food, here, eat, manja, and you would have your dessert and you would eat, and it's good, like, and it's a different way. So being mindful can help you be consistent and help set you up for the win. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
So Carrie, so much good conversation today. A lot of good tips and feedback. Our listeners know they can reach out to you on kerryforeman.com. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Um, I think I just really want to stress this piece of understanding and accepting all of you, because I really feel like that is an important piece to healing. And it is an important piece to resilience and resourcefulness and being able to move forward in your life. I think so often we shame ourselves or we channel a voice of a caregiver we grew up with, and it keeps us stuck. And the more you can hear yourself and understand and accept yourself, the more resilient you will be.
Wonderful. So I don't know how many times I felt stuck in my life and didn't know why. And now at 50, fabulous 50, I will be, I'm not 50 yet, but I will be. But it's true that, understanding, oh, this is why I'm reacting to this. It's because of what my mother taught me or what I believed. And, guess what? I can fast 12 hours or 16 hours without eating breakfast. Like, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. Like, what? I don't understand that because that's what I was taught. So now the doctor's telling me, oh, you should fast this many hours. Anyway, it's just
Yeah.
another thing, like an
Yeah.
example of how our belief systems were there, and
Uh,
it may not work for us today, or it may not work
yeah.
for our children.
Just how strong those neural pathways are. I describe them as roads, and that the road that you traveled down growing up, the things that were told to you, the things that were taught to you, how you were domesticated into the systems that we live inside of, those are what will come easiest. So don't shame yourself for those, but we can also at the same time really work on building new neural pathways for new behaviors, new thoughts, new ways of thinking.
That sounds wonderful. So those survival strategies that everyone has built up and stored away, not something that they have to rely on because they may not work, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you teach your clients to learn to let go, to accept their whole self, to come to that path of healing. Listeners out there, if you have yourself, you want to take her new Journey to Self online guided program, you can join that online as well. She has different grounded parent, grounded tween, grounded teen programs. I'm definitely going to leverage that for my daughter. And
And
again, I really love the idea that we can get a hold of our behaviors and change our lives. Kerry, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I definitely will look forward to your upcoming book and look forward to seeing what else comes from you. Appreciate that.
thank you so much for having me, Alicia. I truly appreciate the time to talk about all of this. I could talk about it forever. And I do want to mention, if for some reason you find it hard to find one of those self-paced programs on my website, just shoot me an email, groundedminds@gmail.com, and I'm happy to help you with that.
Sounds good. This has been Alicia Pozsony with Resilient You. Join us next week for special guest Dr. Yvonne Kay for a colorful, vibrant, heartfelt look at trauma and how she sustained herself after going through a war. She will teach us the possibilities on being who you want to be. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe, share, and comment so we can get feedback on the show. We love having you, and remember, you don't have to go through it. You can grow through it.